From his studios in New York, it's time for Wake Up Call with Dan Tortora, where sports meets life. Here's your host, Dan Tortora.
Always appreciate some time with Oswego State Lakers men's basketball head coach Jason Leone. Jason, how are we doing today?
Hey, Dan, what's going on? Just got my workout in. I'm refreshed and ready to go here.
Awesome. Well, first and foremost, Jason, you're coming off of a Sweet 16 berth and an opportunity. This is the second one that you've had as the head coach of the Oswego State Lakers. Just what you can say first and foremost about getting to the Sweet 16 not once but twice in your shorter career here. You haven't been in Oswego forever. This is a huge accomplishment to do it once, and to do it twice and most recently is obviously a big accomplishment as well. So just what you could say about where this program is at making it to the Sweet 16.
Well, I think that it's as you mentioned, it is a great accomplishment. Now that the season is over, it's I always tell our guys it's okay to reflect and say when things are good and talk in past tense now. So I am really proud of the guys and where things are at right now. And now our job turns as players, as coaches, to start focusing on next year and what we can do to get back there and hopefully maybe even take a step further, but it's certainly as when you reach that level, the NCAA tournament, that means you're part of a very select group and I'm really excited to be in that position for our program right now.
And when you look at the program and just what what Oswego State was before you got there, I know you said that we've talked about it. You inherited a program that had some recent success, but to talk about Oswego State synonymous with the Sweet 16 has got to be special for you and where this team is at this moment.
It is. And, one of the things is I do continue to mention, I took over a really good program, but the thing that has really happened now is we're able to use some of this success to help us in the recruiting trail, and that's really where the success originates, is with the players that we've had and the assistant coaches that have put in so much hard work in recruiting those players. But, to be able to go into a recruit's living room and say, we have the most wins in the East region over the 8 years. We're completing our best 8-year stretch in program's history. We've been to the NCAA tournament more than any other team in the East region. We've had more All-Americans than anybody. All these things, to go into a living room and say that to a recruit, that is going to pay dividends. And we're fortunate enough that it has. And, now we turn our attentions to finishing off this recruiting class, and we'll be mentioning these same things again shortly here as we plan our first postseason recruiting trip here that's going to start this week.
And what can you say about, getting right back onto the recruiting trail? How much time do you spend letting the end of the season marinate? Because I know that obviously it's bittersweet. So how much time do you spend with it before you shift your focus?
It depends on the year. This year, I let it go a little quicker because, I don't know how other coach handles it, but I was kind of at the point where I said, okay, whatever happens now happens. After we won at home the first 2 rounds and we got to the Sweet 16, I watched the film on Marietta and I said, this is a team I think we can play with and have a chance to beat, albeit we were going to have to play well. And, we didn't, and we came up short, but going into that game, I said, okay, whatever happens now happens. And, that helps me in particular, keeps some perspective. And, right after the game was over, I explained to the guys, look, it's over. Sometimes you just get beat. That team beat us. They made 11 threes. They played exceptionally well. And I just explained to them, handle it how you want, but my preference or my suggestion would be, let's not walk out of here with somber faces and tears and all that. Let's go enjoy the second game. Let's, hang out together, enjoy the rest of this trip, and really enjoy and reflect upon how special a group this really was. So this year, and answer your question, it was kind of a quick recovery, so to speak, from an emotional standpoint. And I started making notes on recruiting on the plane ride home. And other years, where maybe we haven't had as much success, that's a little harder to get over because you reflect on some things and try to identify maybe some mistakes that you made. But nonetheless, if you sit there and feel sorry for yourself, that's going to subtract from the next group that you have to form. And typically I give it a day, and then right after that we start getting on the road and start to go see some kids play.
And, when you get to do that, when you get to, go right back on the road and do your thing and whatnot, like you said, you gave it some time. This is more of a quick turnaround. How did the team respond to it? Because you know kind of how you have felt in past years and the last time you made it to the Sweet 16. So you know how you reacted to it. How did you see the team react to the loss when you said, hey, let's not hang our heads? They beat us. Let's walk out of this gym. Let's watch the second game. Let's appreciate what we did this season and move forward. How did they respond?
They listen. I get the feeling like they really listen to me. It was more of a factor of not that they think I know what I'm talking about, but I think they trust me. You know what I mean? And I think that they realized how special this group was and how special the season was and what we accomplished. Those are some private moments in the locker room, but they were, I was really proud of this group. Something that was a little different than most years. A couple of them raised their hands after I gave a short talk, thanking the seniors and thanking my assistant coaches. A couple of them raised their hand and asked permission to say a couple things to the team, and a couple of our seniors thanked the team, and then a couple of our younger guys, said thanks and said some things along the lines of, you guys are family and I love you guys. And those are really special moments, Dan, in sports that, as a coach, I don't know, the wins are great. I'm proud of our team for the winning, but just as proud when you sit there and listen to, young adults or grown men sit there and tell somebody else in the locker room that they love them, how much they appreciate their coaches. They come to you and they're 18 years old a lot of times, and then when they leave, it's like you wonder when they're 21 and they say things like that. You could have never seen them being adult enough to say something like that when they're 18. So at some level, you feel like you see, just in that instance, you see such growth from when they started with you to when they finished. That really makes you proud. But they listened. They went out. I did not sit with them during the game because it was a sellout, but I went to standing room only portion of the stadium. But I looked down there and watched them interacting, and they were laughing and busting chops like they normally do. And we had a lot of laughs in the airport early the next morning, and it was really a fun ride back. And I wanted to end it on that note, and thankfully they agreed, and we had a good time.
That coming from Jason Leone, the head coach of the Oswego State Lakers men's basketball team, coming off of their second trip to the Sweet 16 in the NCAA Division III men's basketball tournament under his tutelage and his leadership. Jason, to speak on, in general, the NCAA Division III tournament, I was speaking with, Division II as well, and how hard it is to get into these tournaments. And, Division I, there's over 300 teams, 68 make it with the play-in games and whatnot. But when you talk to D2 coaches and D3 coaches that I've spoken with here in the Northeast, it is very difficult to get in here, and there's regions, and who did you play, and how did you play against them, and whatnot. Just to tell everybody kind of how the road is if you don't win your conference tournament, or even if you do win your conference tournament, just how the road is for you to get into the NCAA D3 tournament and how it isn't a cakewalk by any stretch of the imagination.
So I'll try to give you a succinct version I can. I'm actually on the NCAA Regional Advisory Committee for the East Region. So basically the way our tournament is comprised in Division III is there's 64 teams that qualify. There's 426 applicable teams that have an opportunity to play to get into this. So there's 426, 64 teams. There are 21 at-large bids to the tournament. So then that leaves, 43 conference tournament winners or automatic qualifiers. So first off, with the conference tournament winners, you're playing in a win-or-go-home scenario. You're playing teams for a third time. That goes without saying. That's a challenge, right? but the 21 at-large bids, those are amongst, whatever 426 minus 43 is. So, that goes by a computer system where you analyze numbers. So it's different than Division I. There's no quote-unquote eyeball test because, like Division I, there's more flying across regions. There's more television where people watch people play. In our, division, there's not as much of that at all. So we use this computer system where you evaluate people's numbers against one another, winning percentage, wins against regionally ranked opponents, wins against common opponents, your strength of schedule, wins against the RPI top 100, that type of thing. So for the most part, that's strictly by the numbers. And, the teams that get in as an at-large, but typically we only play 25 regular season games in Division III. So typically those are teams that have, anywhere between 19, usually they're in the 20s with their win total. So that means you're winning over 80% of your games, so that's very challenging too. Like, in other words, I guess what I'd tell you is, you're looking at teams like Texas in Division I, who's 16 and 15. They're still on the bubble. Like, there's none of that in Division III. Like the teams that typically make it in, I think the lowest number of wins I've ever seen for an at-large team is 18. So, that gives you an idea that it is incredibly challenging to get into our tournament. And then you got to go win 6 games to win the thing. I remember saying to my assistants after our game how challenging it was just to get to the Sweet 16. We won 2 games. I said, can you imagine there's going to be a team that's going to win 4 more of these games, to win the national title? Like, it's mind-blowing how challenging that is. And then you look at guys like, Mike Krzyzewski and John Wooden and, heck, even Jim Boeheim that's won 1. I mean, it's totally mind-blowing to me how challenging that is to win one of those things.
And you've had 19 win seasons, you've had 17 win seasons and whatnot. But as this team has grown, 2015, 16, 22, and 9, and then 21 wins in 2016, 17. Last season had some adversity at 14 and 13, and then ultimately this year 24 and 6, the best record that you've had since being at Oswego State. Just what it says to you that your best is right now. And I'm sure with you, your best is yet to come as well.
Yeah. Well, I inherited a team. I don't want to shortchange my first team. We were 26 and 4 that year. So
all right, that
was our best. But this is our second best. But they're all rewarding, Dan. I would be very remiss if I singled out one group over another. But to your question, I do think, I don't know if this is where you're going with it, but I do think one of the most gratifying things, or one of the most challenging things to do as a coach, is to sustain success. Like you're going to go through peaks and valleys with recruiting where you maybe in basketball get that one special All-American and you can ride that guy for a 3 or 4 year stretch. I do think the consistency that our program has played at, you look at, we've finished in the top 4 in a very difficult conference all 8 years that I've been here. Those are things that to our players and to our staff are incredibly gratifying and important, that we've stayed at the top of that proverbial mountain for such a long time. And that is really hard to do, because that shows that we're not a one-hit wonder, and that to me is incredibly gratifying, because you'll see teams that maybe catch lightning in a bottle with a recruiting class or 2, and they'll go and make the Sweet 16, maybe even make a Final Four, make a national championship run, but then they go right back down to that mediocre level. And to sit there and say we've been in our conference semifinals or better every single year for the last 8 years, 9 years as a program, that is incredibly difficult to do. And the reason I know that is nobody else in our league has done that. So we're real happy about where we're at right now. But what comes with those victories and that success is, you get greedy. And now I'm sitting there looking at, we got to get back there next year.
And and having that, and like you said, the first season, 26 and 4, now 24 and 6. You go back to inheriting that team at 24 and 6 this season. This one is yours. They are your recruits. You have been in this for a while. This is not a team that you've inherited just to go a little bit deeper into that part of it, of how sweet it felt to be 26-4, but then to be 24-6 and make it to the Sweet 16 and know that these are your recruits. This is 100% your team. There is no turnover from a different coach. Just what that means to you.
No, it means a lot, and I've never been anybody, and to go back to that 26-4, just because I don't want to shortchange her in case any of them listen, I always, anytime a coach takes over, I didn't recruit those guys, but I treated them, of course, like my players, but I think it's more that those guys set a standard that I learned from about what a great team looks like, and that gave me a point of reference that I didn't have to figure out. So many coaches take over jobs because maybe there wasn't a lot of winning going on. For me, I got an initial point of reference that was the best team that I've been a part of in terms of leadership and talent level and all that, and that has helped me on the recruiting trail since then. And going to this year's team, this was a team that, quite frankly, was a group of overachievers. So that gave me a different perspective on winning. Right now I'm still in the combination of trying to prepare for next year, but still really celebrating, the season that we had and enjoying, seeing these guys now for the first time yesterday where we didn't have practice, watching them smile, and we're not in the middle of a work day anymore, so they deserve to have this kind of 2-week, what I call a cooling off period. They're going to go on spring break next week, and then when they get back, we'll get to work on next year, I'm really proud of just the word I always use is just consistency. You know what I mean? We have been a model of consistency. I could say that after 8 years, that's a long enough time period to say there's a track record there, and I'm excited to keep this train rolling. And again, now the next step is, I told my AD on the flight home, I said, I'm greedy enough. I'm like, how do we kind of get to that next step and maybe try to get to a Final Four here, So that's my thought process now.
Yeah, and to have that, what do you think are those, what is missing? What are those pieces? What's on your mind, like you said, to be greedy and say, we made it to the Sweet 16. How do we get to the Final Four? What have you kind of, written down on your notepad as you move forward here that you're missing that you want to bring in?
Well, it's in recruiting, and it's not because we don't have good players now. It's just I looked at, you go out to the Midwest and the depth, we have not had the depth. I look at the 3 teams that we've had that have really played at a high level, a top 25 level program, and we have usually gotten to the Sweet 16 where we've played a rotation of 6 or 7 guys. We just, I look at Augustana, we were out there playing, they played the second game, they have 3 guys that were 6'10", but the challenge is, Dan, is in our region, the recruiting is so regional in our division. Can we get 3-6? We don't need 3 6'10" guys, but the bodies on those guys. We've got 5 or 6 guys with those body types, but after our 6th guy, I'm playing freshman. And the goal is in recruiting, we've got to get it so our 7th and 8th guys are not first-year players, and that's not that freshmen can't be talented, but their bodies just aren't developed enough yet. So in answer to your question, the bodies on those guys were very impressive to me, and it was great for our players to see because I think that starts to inherently form a mindset in their eyes where, hey, I think I'm pretty good, and I was recruited by this Division II and this Division I school. Then you look at those guys who are Division III players, and you realize there's a whole other world out there, So that's the first thing. The second thing is trying to figure out strategically, okay, how do we improve this depth? Because the reality is in the Northeast, and one of our challenges, and every job has its challenges, is there's so many schools out here. There's 60 Division III schools in New York State, and we're all beating heads against the door for the same players, So we've got to be more creative in our recruiting to try to improve that depth. I also think it helps when you got to have a guy that's kind of better than everybody else. Like this year's team, we had a great balance, but we didn't have that one All-American. I think that's a model that we need to get to as well. There's got to be one chief and then a bunch of guys that are not as far behind. We had the one run where we had the kid Sortino where he was an All-American, but then there was a little bit of a drop-off in talent after that. Still guys that were all-league players, but we've got to have more of those secondary guys that are a little closer level to an All-American. So I don't know if that answers your question, but those are a couple things just initially that I thought of after watching the games out there.
That comment from Jason Leone, Oswego State Lakers. Jason, what keeps you in Oswego? Before we finish up here, just what is it about Oswego State? What is it about this team? What is it about this history that makes you want to be there?
Well, I grew up in Syracuse, and part of why I took the job is, my wife and I have two young children, and they're growing up, a mile away from their cousins, and my parents live 3 miles from us, so that's number one. Number two, I love my boss, my athletic director, and I. We have a really good relationship, and I really enjoy going to work with her every day, and the morale that she's created in our department at Oswego State is it's a really fun place to go to work every day. The third thing is I feel like we can go there and win championships and be in the mix every year, So those are three really good reasons, they gave me an opportunity when I was at a no-name job, and and I had an opportunity to go back and move with family. And I think you have to keep in perspective, whenever you're a coach, about everything that's involved with a job. And there's probably other places that might pay more money or might say, oh, you might be able to win a national championship there, but do they have the combination of work with family? Because that's really what, it's not a cliche, but that's kind of what keeps me going. Everybody's made up differently. For me, watching my kids grow up, go to Catholic school in the area here, have an opportunity to go to CDA when they get older, where I went, that really means a lot to me, So it doesn't mean that that's the right way for every coach, but for me, that's kind of what makes me tick, and those are the reasons I love working at Oswego.
Family guy, family focus, community focus, and a connection to the blue collar beauty of upstate and central New York. Jason, there's a lot of reasons how you and I bond, and the winning mentality, the never say die, is definitely a big part of that, and so is family and staying connected to your roots. So let me thank you. I know I have before, but let me thank you again for all the work that you've done, for being a part of our community and being one of the tremendous people here that's doing great things.
Well, thank you, Dan, and I do want to thank you publicly on the air here for just your well wishes, and I read your believe it or not, your text was the last I read before I took the floor on Friday night, and it got me juiced up. You know what I mean? I banged a couple lockers and went out there and tried to coach my best. You know what I mean? So it was really really refreshing. All the people that sent us well wishes, but I appreciate your friendship and the things that you're doing to help promote our program in Central New York sports as well. Well,
thank you for that, and that right there, those are the moments, that the fact that you just said that you read that text before you went out, and it was the last one you read, and Gina Castelli with Lemoyne and being there on Sunday. I mean, there's people in this community that you root for, and it's moments like that I don't have words for. So I guess you are on a very short list of people that I can say have left me speechless on my own radio show. So thank you for that.
Okay. Well, thank you for everything, and looking forward to staying in touch with you over the next few months. And let's hope the Syracuse Orange get it going here in the ACC tournament. I'm excited to start watching that now that our season's over.
Yeah, it's gonna be interesting. How far do you have them go? I released my ACC tournament bracket today, and I have Syracuse defeating Boston College. I think Boston College is going to move on. So I have Syracuse going up against Duke and losing to Duke, because if I know anything about covering the ACC tournament, it's that Duke, North Carolina, and Virginia are typically what I see at the end. So, I mean, what do you think? Do you see them getting past Duke? What do you see?
Well, I would never pick against Syracuse, especially in postseason. I think their style is built for postseason. The two things is that zone is much tougher. I don't know why, but it's much tougher in postseason than it is in regular season. And then I think the way Syracuse plays on offense, where they try to isolate and get their better players the ball in their hands, I think that is a method for success in postseason as well. So I do like that about them. I think they'll win their first game. The second game against Duke, I don't know about the result there, but I do know I really believe that will be a close game. But I actually would. This is one of the teams that I would predict Syracuse maybe doing better in the NCAA tournament than they would in the ACC tournament. Only because, it is very difficult to prepare as somebody that plays a lot of zone. When you don't see the zone, and Syracuse will play non-regional opponents in the NCAA.
Yeah.
That's going to be very, very difficult for those teams to prepare for. And Syracuse seems to play with a little bit of an edge and a little bit more swagger when they play in the NCAA tournament as well. I think they do. You know what I mean? So and I think that zone and the way they play, I think Coach Boeheim has them playing with a lot more confidence. And so I don't know about the ACC tournament, but I have them playing a little bit better and advancing further in the NCAA tournament.
And I think what it comes down to is what you just said, which is a great point, which is nobody wants to play them in the NCAA tournament. So that's just how it is. It doesn't really matter where they go. It's a benefit to them to get away from the ACC and see somebody new, and that usually bodes well in their favor. So good point there by Jason Leone here, Oswego State Lakers men's basketball head coach. Once again, congratulations on another Sweet 16 run, and I look forward to talking with you soon.
Likewise, Dan. Thanks for everything.
All right. Take care.